This is Lewis here to talk to you today about finding great primary sources for your project. I wanted to highlight two that I think are really terrific: ProQuest Historical Newspapers, and then a new database that we just subscribed to, which is called Accessible Archives. This is the ProQuest Historical Newspapers. This is a really terrific source to get familiar with, since you'll probably be using it in college as well. What it does is cover the full runs of the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, the Atlanta Constitution, the Pittsburgh Courier, and the Hartford Courant. Almost all of them covered the Gilded Age time period, so it could be really useful. And obviously, if you're focusing on a specific area of the country, you can go ahead and narrow it down by that. Otherwise, you're searching all of the resources. Please note also that you can search by decade, which is really useful, or for a specific date. So I often like to do after. If it's a specific event that I'm looking for, I'll do after and then the date of that event, and then I know anything coming is more likely to have related search terms to it. In terms of search terms, please do consider the fact that your search terms need to contain keywords that would have been used to describe the event or topic at that time period. An example I always give, even though it's past what you're searching right now, is World War I. A lot of students attempt to search World War I looking for primary documents, and of course, no one called it World War I at the time period from 1914 to 1917 because they didn't know there'd be a World War II. So searching war or the Great War was what they used at the time, and so that's incredibly useful. Please also note that the article types default to general, article, front page, and editorial. This really is a ton of information, but if you are interested in someone who's passed away and you want to see their obituary, if you're interested in editorial cartoons, or if you're doing something having to do with literature or plays and the arts, a review could also be really helpful. There's also a More button, so if you're looking for letters to the editor or birth notices or weather or whatever, you can go ahead and find a lot of options right here. Something that I find is actually incredibly useful for people is to use either the interactive timeline, which allows you to click on various points and it takes you to specific topics that have to do with it, or is just to go straight to the topics area. And if you take a look at topics right here, you can see there are several things that have to do with the Gilded Age. Obviously the Industrial Age, if you're doing something having to do with progress or manufacturing. Westward Expansion is a really terrific one, as well as the latter part of Reconstruction for you. If we take a look at Westward Expansion, I think it's a good example. It gives you a general paragraph summarizing the themes of what was happening during that time period, as well as giving you specific topics that are subtopics relating to westward expansion. So if I, for example, was really interested in doing something about the Transcontinental Railroad, if I click on that, what ends up happening is that there is a pre-vetted list of between 25 and 50 articles. So I have a little overview of what was happening with the Transcontinental Railroad, and then in chronological order, starting from the newspaper article it thinks is the most relevant for the start of this all the way to the last one, which is around 1900, I have this all here. So this really narrows down my searching time, and obviously I know that everything having to do with this is really helpful. Please notice that there are these little plus buttons over here. This is sort of adding something to your shopping cart. So say, for example, I was really interested in the use of Chinese immigrants in the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad. I would go ahead and probably add a few of these onto it. And what it does is, after I've added it in to that cart, it lives in my list up here. So if I click on this, I can see everything that I have hit that plus button for. And a really quick way of making sure that I have what I need is to go to the email current page. And if I put in my information, and say attach PDF images, if I then hit submit, now everything has been emailed to my email account as PDF attachments. So that enables me to just kind of pop them up into my Google file that I'll probably have set aside for this project for things that I'm finding, and it really, really makes me efficient. So that's super useful. Accessible Archives is the second primary source, and this database is new to us this year, and I think it really offers a nice complement to the historical newspapers. Probably a good idea to go ahead and take a look is to see their collections page. This lists everything that they have, and I think you'll see what I mean. Oh, look, see, my articles came through from ProQuest. Here you can see they have a really nice selection of African American newspapers, and you can see some of it is early, but others do cover the time period. So this is giving you a very specific perspective, which is incredibly useful. You can also see that there are regional resources by county. So if you're focusing on a specific area, that can be excellent. What I love are the things having to do with women. I think if your topic has anything to do with women during this time period, you would be crazy not to go ahead and search accessible archives. Frank Leslie's Weekly and Godey's Ladies Book are both general periodicals meant for women, and I don't think that they had a very specific political slant, although there were a lot of more progressive articles. I think they tried to show a variety of viewpoints in them, as well as you can see The Liberator is something for African American with their types of political work that was being done during this time period. So that's a really, really great one and just very interesting to look at. You can see here they've broken out some specific things having to do with women's suffrage. So anything having to do with women's rights is also worth taking a look at in suffrage. They didn't just talk about voting because they were interested in all aspects having to do with women during that time period. So these are really useful to go ahead and take a look at as well. So let's go ahead and actually search them. So I've actually done a search on women's education and college, or just the three search terms that I did to see what could come up with higher education. And you can see they do allow you to narrow down parameters. Here I could narrow it down. We have 5,437 newspaper articles. There's county histories. There's 139 books that it has in there. And you can see some of them. Here is an 1887 publication called A History of Women's Suffrage, which would have been a relatively brief history at that time. And clearly there is a chapter that has to do with education. Here's an article about women in dentistry from 1887 in Godey's Ladies Book. Here's The Liberator covering the Women's Rights Convention from 1855, and that would be a really interesting African American perspective of that as well. Here's a great looking article from 1901, Why Women Need a College Education by Frank Leslie's Weekly. So you can see that they're not in any particular chronological order, so I could also narrow it down. If I was interested only in, say, the 1870s, I could go ahead and click on that, and now my results are only for that specific time period as well. So there are a lot of ways to go ahead and play with this and see during different eras and with different perspectives what people were thinking about. And that, of course, is the point of primary documents. You are looking for contemporary perspectives in order to analyze them and show how they fit in with your thesis. As always, if you have any questions, please do go ahead and come up to the front desk and let us know. If you're not finding what you need, chances are it might be a keyword term that we need to go ahead and tweak, and we are happy to go ahead and help you with that. Good luck with all your great research.